Jin Yan immediately got ready to sub in for his best friend, removing his jacket and taking the seat. Chang Yun, on the other hand, felt bad that his strategy wasn't implemented to its fullest. Mr. Yoon comforted him, saying that strategies won't always decide wins, they must be flexible at all times. Sometimes, it's up to the players to decide what the best moves are for themselves. Moreover, in the end, it all worked out as they intended. This kid's analytical skills and strategies are really something else. But Chang Yun himself is unsatisfied with his own plan. He wants to make something more foolproof for next time. As for Jiho, it seems like he's in a good spot. They were lucky that Pogak Hai was trying to stall, so he didn't have to go all out. Mr. Yoon is just happy with how well things are going for them this time. For now, Jin Yang must buy them as much time as possible, and Jiho is this guy's #1 believer. He also believes in Mr. Yoon's leadership. Those words almost brought a tear to the underappreciated supervisor's eyes. On the other side of the gaming cafe, angry and frustrated sentiments echoed. Pogak High players have underestimated just how good Dano High is. They had more than enough healing too. It's just that they fell against relentless aggression. The captain remained calm, though for him, this first round is just all about testing the waters. They simply did not have enough damage, but that issue should be fixed with J-Duck here. They assess that Aries' DPS is quite good, but it's nothing they can't beat. For the second round, it seems like they're going to show their true playstyle. The captain reassured J-Duck that he'll cover when things get messy so the kid can go on and wreak some havoc. And finally, Pogak High versus Dano High second has started. The enemy side picked Baronet to tank, Imamiz and Jigdra as healers, and Jester, controlled by J-Duck, as the solo DPS. On the Dano High side, we have Axa as the tank, Bluminance as DPS, Link as the healer, and another Spiro pick in the support role. They need to take the lead before the enemies find out what they are cooking with this pick with So Yeon in control. Yujin is not happy at all with this stalling strategy. He just wants to brawl and go for the win. So Yeon reminded Jin Yang that he's really important for this round, so he must bring his good plays like last time. Encouraging words from a cutie are Jin Yang's biggest buff. He's confident this time around he's done his homework after all. He didn't slack off and finished his training. Lil Bro went on his own mini-training arc. His Axa plays have been polished to a high degree. But on the opposition, J-Duck, the DPS with Jester, has locked onto him. He saw the enemy use a close-range dash, so a hit from behind should be the next move. Thinking that he was clever for reading the next play, he swung behind him with full force, but he hit nothing but air, becoming confused that his read was wrong. The enemy DPS faked the move, something considered basic at this level of play. J-Duck already pegged him as some low-tier player for sure. This action on one side of the field distracted So Yeon for just a second, but that was enough for a blue force to descend upon her Spiro from the flank. She was knocked back by the enemy's tank captain. Motivated by his defeat by the same hero in the first round, Captain Taehan wants his vengeance. Jin Yang kept timing in mind while J-Duck is running and leaping circles around him. His reckless swings finally opened an opening for the DPS to exploit. In a few minutes, they were locked in a 1 versus 1. He became increasingly aware that he was no match against the enemy team's ace. As his HP bar came dangerously close to 0, Link's bandages swooped in. He was healed up in just a moment thanks to Yujin's interference. His HP recovered, but he was still in a daze from being toyed with. Yujin cursed him out for not focusing, as this murderous healer couldn't heal everyone after all. The enemy DPS attack patterns were just too weird, but Jin Yang could still block some strikes here and there. If that was the case, Aries stepped in to reprimand him to get back to his job. She also turned the 1 versus 1 into a 1 versus 2. J-Duck changed his focus to her as he slowly dominated in that matchup as well. He thought that everyone on the opposing team played like nudes with how easily he dictated the pace. Aries was having a rough time keeping up with the attack rate. Seeing this arrogant sequence of attacks and hearing the voice comms, Captain Aries couldn't take the noob insult lying down. She took a chance at a small opening to land a fierce blow, chunking J-Duck's health. Now, Jin Yang had to step up to the plate so Aries could move on to other targets. And that he did. With a renewed HP bar, Jin Yang would have another go at it. One of the enemy healers tried to take advantage of Axa showing his wide-open back, but the magic spell was quickly thwarted by the psycho healer known as Yujin. All this stalling had thoroughly pissed him off. It was about time he went on a murder spree of his own. Jin Yang and the captain finally linked up again. It was now up to him to keep the main DPS busy while Aries tried to pick off other players. She was going for the wide-open healer near her. This healer was undeniably in a bad spot as he needed to move back and stick to their tank. While being chased by Eri, the healer took cover behind their captain, who was facing So-Yen's Spiro. But Yujin also noticed that the other healer was wriggling his way to Jin Yong and Jae-Duck's duel. This prompted Yujin to go out of position for some good old healer and healer 1 versus 1. They were starting to lose control of everyone's position. One of the healers got behind his tank, but Captain Eri was hot on his tail. Everyone in the field was getting frustrated. Captain Taehan knew that he needed to make some space so they could break through with their ace, Jae-Duck's damage. And after doing that, the sole DPS finally had an opening to thread through. Coming from behind, he targeted Axe's wide-open defenses. Everyone in the audience held their breath in anticipation. Jiho wanted to see how his friend would deal with this situation. Jin Yong wielded his blade with only one word in mind. It was almost like nothing else mattered outside of that word. And that one thing that consumed him was simply timing. Jae-Duck proceeded with the play as he usually did, but as he got closer, the weirder he felt. It was almost like he was seeing the former One Sword's moves in that pixelated game. Jiho also felt that same nostalgic feeling. This lit a fire under Pogak High's DPS prodigy. His APM skyrocketed with precise mouse and keyboard mechanics. Until finally, he managed to circumvent Jin Yong's perfect timing with just pure mechanical skill. Axe's HP bar quickly evaporated into nothingness. Meanwhile, Eri was completely barred from jumping into the action by the enemy captain. She was held back so hard that she just started noticing that Jin Yong had died. And to make matters worse, Jae-Duck had finally gotten his ult from that tank kill. He activated that powerful ability, blowing Captain Eri's back. This guy was in the zone right now. He gritted his teeth after getting clean hits one after another. His captain completely relied on his hot hands. With more wide dashes and powerful slashes, he sliced and diced Eri like it was nothing. The kid cooked them so bad. The match lasted for about 8 minutes and 52 seconds. Chang-Yun looked at the extent of round 2 and evaluated that this was not bad at all. The second round went to Pogak High. They might have lost frustratingly, but Mr. Yoon was there to cheer the team up. For now, it's about time for Jiho to take the steering wheel of the team again. Everyone wanted to ask if he felt better already and if he could play. But it looked like our boy was in tip-top shape again. He praised his best friend for his good work in the second round. And now they needed to get ready for the third. A different level of determination shone in his eyes this time around. He also had something to say to Mr. Yoon that caught everyone's attention. For the third round, he wanted to swap with their captain Eri and not with Jin Yong. Oh snap, drama. After finishing the grueling battle of round 2, Pogak High was in a celebratory mood following their victory. They believed they could continue winning in the subsequent rounds. Some of them were still bitter that they could have achieved a clean sweep if only Jae-Duck hadn't been late. The kids still felt remorse for inconveniencing the team. Captain Taehan was always there to support the young ace, but gave him a stern warning that if he were late again, he would be out of the tournament. On the other side, they noticed Eri being subbed out for some reason. They were confused because she was one of the best players for Dano High throughout the series. They watched as the enemies made a significant move. Meanwhile, Captain Eri naturally opposed being subbed out of her chair, but Jiho was determined to remove her from the shot-calling position for the third round. Without exchanging words, he simply looked at the root cause of his request. She instantly understood why Jiho was making such a sudden request to bench her. It was all because of her right hand injury after playing at full speed in the first 2 rounds. She's going to need a hand transplant or something. He reassured her that he had something special prepared with Jin Yong, so the victory was already within their grasp. He was just asking for this one chance to take on the foes with their own strategy. Eri, as the captain, and Mr. Yoon were also in the dark as to why Jiho would suddenly request a sub, but she relented and agreed to skip the round. She acknowledged his request, but she didn't know what Jiho had up his sleeve. But whatever it was, she gave him permission to go all in. Seeing that the captain was receptive to his request, Jiho's mood lifted, and so the third round of the match officially began. It looked like it would be a replay of the last round, with the picks and strategies remaining largely unchanged. However, on Dano High's side, Jiho instructed everyone to charge straight at the enemy. Jin Yong was kind of skeptical because with this clash, they were just going to get completely blocked. That's exactly the kind of space Spiro needed to do his own thing. Jin Yong was finally catching up to what his best friend was trying to do, but still, he'd prefer fighting the enemy tank over the genius enemy DPS any day of the week. The sounds of clashes echoed throughout the entire gaming cafe. Captain Taehan went all out with his aggressive tanking style right from the start. Axa responded appropriately, following Jiho's strategy book to be specific. But as the two tanks locked in combat, someone else ran to the flank. Captain Taehan was too focused on their one-on-one that an enemy managed to punch through. He tried to turn around, but Yujin just taunted him, pulling away with a perfect dash. Dano Hai was trying to take out the backline while leaving the tanks busy facing each other. Captain Taehan believed that they were underestimating their damage output just because they ran two healers. So, he happily called the shots to J-Duck as the enemy lost their formidable main DPS. But the kid had a complicated expression on his face instead of the usual confidence. This, of course, didn't escape the captain's attention. They should have been running away with the lead by now. J-Duck was being driven into a corner with a heavy sense of confusion. And that's because he was facing Jiho's Spiro for the first time in this series. No matter what type of combo he strung together or how crafty his sword and slash placement was, he just sank deeper and deeper into despair, feeling helpless against a supposed support hero. Not only was he failing to land clean shots, but he was also being perfectly countered like an amateur. This was where Jiho excelled, identifying the offbeat combo timings. While engrossed in the one-on-one, both of them had the same exact thoughts. They felt that their respective enemies' playstyle was strangely and deeply familiar. Even the little details, such as the timing of retreat, were oddly recognizable. And for the first time since coming over to Sword Rush, J-Duck felt something he hadn't felt in some time. He felt the immense pressure of a tiny hero being controlled to its highest potential. There was no doubt in his mind that he was playing against somebody who was far superior to him.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
And so, even with his DPS, he was forced to dash to retreat. Jiho, on the other hand, had a similar reaction but in a different sense. He was convinced that J-Duck was indeed the rank 125 player and one sword. Facing him was none other than the player with the cringiest in-game name, Blood Moon Hurricane. To prove his theory a bit more, he let go of his positional advantage and jumped back. He crouched on the ground without breaking the enemy's line of sight. J-Duck immediately knew what this Spiro was doing with just a single glance. The guy on the other side of this monitor is challenging him to charge in. A nostalgic smile crept up on Jiho's face. This boy is a menace to society, or at least in Sword Rush. It's been a long time since they shared the same battlefield. J-Duck's inner rage has been triggered as he refused to listen to the team callouts. But before he could blindly charge at Spiro, one of their healers had jumped into the fray. Captain Taehan positioned himself with healer Suhun to face the enemy's own tank and healer duo. This would give J-Duck and their other healer a stronger chance against the DPS and support duo of Dano Hai. They just have to trust each other to make the right call while keeping it together. Eri watched from the sidelines as her team fell into a pinch without her. The healer scolded J-Duck for falling for taunts while not paying attention to his HP bar. Also, this tiny Spiro is not letting up even with the addition of an enemy healer. Without killing Spiro first, he can't even get close to the enemy DPS. Knowing this, Jiho called the shots and instructed So-Yeon to go after the healer as he turned up the pressure. A single perfectly timed dodge to the left culminated in a critical counterpunch to the face. He sent the enemy DPS skidding across the floor, but they immediately recovered to fight some more. Jiho noticed that the kid had calmed down already. He's keeping his cool even though he's aiming for the head. This Blood Moon Hurricane that he's facing is quite different from back in the day. Compared to that highly skilled but hot-headed player in the Pixel days, he has truly grown. J-Duck is certain that he just needs one good ult to finish off Spiro's low HP. Jiho also notified So-Yeon that he'll be ulting soon in preparation for the enemy's own. He got some good combos in, so he got his ult fast. The ultimate super counter is just waiting to get used at the right time. So-Yeon is also ready to back him up with her skills off cooldown. Jiho baited once more with a crouch, and the DPS Jester took him immediately. J-Duck believes that at point-blank range, not even full-fledged pro players can escape his ult. But Jiho is just built differently compared to everyone else, even the pros. Everything is going according to his plan. Jester's purple blades shone in an electrifying display of potent damage. J-Duck is filled with rage and impatience to kill the Spiro, but that is when everything became clear to him. The presence looming over him the whole match is wearing the yellow cape of the rank 1 god. He watched as his ult gets swallowed up by Spiro's specialty. Using the potent force of the enemy's own blade strike, he leveraged the strongest counterattack possible. The culmination of concentrated strength and power compressed at a single point was displayed on the monitor. At its purest essence, this is a move that he's done countless times in one sword, a move that became his very own. If anyone knew the feeling of defeat from this masterful ability, it's definitely one sword's former rank 125. The colors and the graphics quality are negligible. Right now, he's experiencing the fearsome beating from the gaming god himself in full HD with the same intensity. The ultimate super counter, it really does live up to its extravagant name. Jester ate it up and depleted his HP bar from full to almost zero with a stunning effect as the cherry on top. From above, So Yeon is already descending with her blade to finish the job. As promised, she'll back up Jiho's moves with her skills off cooldown. Jae-duck just sat there, stunned and speechless at what he just experienced. Memories of one sword came back to him. He knows that rather than just the hero Spiro, this guy was the real namesake. On the side of Dano High, the victory screen lit up their faces with cheer and smiles for taking the lead in the series against Pogak High, 2-1. Right after the round, Jiho sprinted out of his seat without anyone knowing why. His teammates at their seats, Captain Eri, and even the Pogak High team fresh off their loss were confused. He grabbed Jae-duck's arms, driving him out of the seat to have a talk. The kid is still reeling from his loss, and Jiho's already there yanking him out of the gaming chair. As if they were old friends reunited, he called Jae-duck by his old in-game name, Blood Moon Hurricane. Of course, the guy would be embarrassed in front of everyone. Bro, imagine calling you XX Dami Mummy XX in real life. All of Jiho's superhuman performance in this round was made possible by Emotion's sickness patch. He was able to recover quickly and win the match in the blink of an eye. The expressions on the faces of the Pogak High roster were the same as when they lost the previous match against the Bowl Cut gang. Even Jin Young had no words to say to them because he knew exactly how they felt. Wrapping up the match, he felt a bit sorry for them. But the happiness of their first win as a team just felt way too good. The feeling of sorrow for the defeated team was not enough to stop the sweet taste of the first victory. It's only their second match to date, and they already have a win under their belts. Jiho was getting embarrassed as his best friend went wild with joy outside the gaming cafe. For all of them, this sense of achievement essentially changed everything. The next day, Mr. Yoon is talking with the school president, trying to sell the students' massive potential. He's asking for permission to be allowed to use the club room during study hall. This would help foster their dreams further. The president considered the matter very seriously. First of all, he asked how the students are doing with regards to their grades. Chang-yeon and So-yeon have some of the highest grades in the school, while the rest are more or less average. The president thought about it some more. He then decided that if the grades of two students fall during the upcoming final exam, then club activities will be dismissed. He understands where Mr. Yoon is coming from in this matter. He'd really rather not trample on the dreams of the students, but they must still keep in mind that they are educators first and foremost. That's why they will have a deal if the students take remedial classes. The rarest thing in all of fiction, a reasonable school president. Mr. Yoon thought about the nightmare that is handling the remedial classes of his players, but he accepted the condition nonetheless for the sake of better training conditions. The team had gathered in the club room once again. Captain Eri praised everyone for yesterday's win. She told everyone to get an early rest, but everyone evidently had dark circles under their eyes. Jin Young said that he just couldn't sleep after the win because his heart was racing so much, stunning the captain. He stayed up all night admiring the replay while praising his supposed unbridled divine talent. Even when he finally went to bed, he dreamt about his impressive performance with Axa. It was to the point of fidgeting and smugly laughing in his sleep. Hearing this from the fool's mouth,
the woman was too stunned to speak.
Similarly, Jiho was also up all night looking at the replays from yesterday's match and ended up sleeping late. With his trusty pen and notes and a chocolate bar, he diligently studied the replays. He analyzed Jin Young's strengths and weaknesses as well as everyone else's, even Pogak High's captain. As for Jin, he's never promised that he would sleep early anyway. He stayed up in the local gaming cafe to the point where the owner had to approach him to leave, and as soon as he got kicked out of that cafe, the grind continued back at his house on his own PC. This is the sanest gamer ever. Even after all the games he grinded non-stop, he's still frustrated for not killing just one more enemy. The captain is at her wit's end with these knuckleheads. So Ian also had trouble falling asleep because she kept thinking about the match and the win. She's always there to raise the morale of everyone with her charm. She also gets why these boys are so excited about their first victory. And as for Eri herself, she said that she went to bed early. But that is not true at all. Like everyone else on the team, she stayed up in front of her computer. But she was watching some tournament replays from the pro player Jin Ah Lee. She watched how she led the national team to the title. She watched her every move diligently and intently. She also thought about how the Pogak High captain, Tae-hun, led their team in a calm and collected manner with passion. It was almost like nothing else matters besides the replay she's watching. Back in the club room, someone else is tapping and clicking non-stop in the corner. It was none other than Chang-yun typing away. Eri asked him if he's mad that his strategy wasn't implemented properly. He denied that it's the case, but he went home early yesterday for some reason. Back in yesterday's match, he happened to see Jiho dragging Jae-duk away to talk in private. They went to the back of the gaming cafe. Jiho asked him if he really was the Blood Moon Hurricane from back then, and he confirmed just to get him to stop saying his old in-game name. Hearing that from Jae-duk, Jiho gave him a brotherly hug. He treated Jae-duk as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other since the servers of One Sword shut down. Given that they had never seen each other's faces, he couldn't believe that he had met someone he used to play with. If everyone who is better than Jae-duk is now a pro gamer, it just makes sense that Jiho is the legendary Spearow. With a genuine smile on his face, he confirmed that he really was the GOAT back then. After confirming each other's identities, Jae-duk asked him how he had figured out who he was after just a single round. But how could he forget the player he had gone up against countless times? Jae-duk was the person he had fought against the most back in the day after all. Hearing that the rank 1 player was glad that they had met in real life touched Jae-duk's feelings. The kid started tearing up for a moment, and Jiho immediately apologized for getting carried away. Jae-duk, though, thought he was smooth as he rubbed his tears away while playing it cool. Bros will be bros, online or offline. Everyone had been curious about who the rank 1 player was, and he never would have imagined that it would be someone his age. He asked Jiho why he hadn't played Sword Rush until now, and he truthfully answered that he just didn't know about the game. Additionally, his computer sucked, so he couldn't play anything else after One Sword ended. A look of nostalgia and joy was plastered on his face. He praised Jae-duk for becoming so much better than he was back then. Back with his confident grin, they really looked like two friends reunited. While the two were continuing to catch up, someone familiar had been lurking from afar. Come to think of it, considering how good Jiho was back then, he did make a few misplays this time around. That might be because he stopped gaming for too long. Even though he was embarrassed to say it, Jae-duk offered some help to train Jiho. It was like the two long-lost competitors re-establishing their connection again. And so, they exchanged phone numbers. Back in the club room, Chang-yun, who had heard the whole conversation, left early since Jiho subbed back in the end. He knew they would win with his strategy. Mr. Yuen finally arrived with big news to tell everyone. They could now practice in the club room during study hall hours. This was a huge addition to their training hours, but there was one condition. If their grades dropped in the next exam, it was back to how it had always been. So, every day after school ended, they would have an hour of special remedial classes. Without concentration in remedial classes, there would be no practice sessions. Also, since So-yeon and Chang-yun had no problems with their grades, they just needed to go to their cram school as usual. Speaking of Chang-yun, he had prepared something for their next match. First of all, they had successfully gained 3 tournament points from yesterday. But Pogak High did not bring their pro gamer trainees. They did well, but they were also lucky. As for the biggest asset during this match, that would go to Jin Yang. Considering how exceptional the enemy captain was as a tank, Jin Yang did a great job fending him off repeatedly. This silver gamer's ego was getting inflated by the second, but he humbly dismissed it as just doing his part. From now on, when Jiho was playing, they would play around him. And when Jin Yang was playing, they would play around Eri. This would be their greatest weaponized rotation. Jin Yang's role had become more crucial than ever to the bigger picture, and when he was playing, he must remember the whole team would collapse if he went down. But this guy was ready to take on the heavy responsibility. The character development is actually insane. Jiho also had one other concern, and that was if Chang-yun would stay with the team or not. Jiho wanted the members to go on like this, but even Yujin noticed that Chang-yun always needed to go off to cram. But like Mr. Yoon said, he was committed to being a part of the club alongside his cram school. And since he couldn't play the game himself, he would continue to come up with strategies. He was also open to any opinions regarding their strats. Eri was amused that this guy was telling him to quit the club not too long ago. Now he might even end up playing the game. Lastly, Chang-yun wanted to lend his computer to Jiho so he could practice competitive matches regularly. This came out of nowhere, and lending a computer was quite a big deal. This guy is putting everyone behind his back without even touching the game. Also, he asked if everyone knew the YouTuber Guraf and the pro gamer Jin Ali. This caught Eri's attention. The mere mention of Jin Ali was a big deal to her. She had been tirelessly watching her plays after all. Chang Yun casually dropped the news that these two established figures would like to set up a meet. He would make a top-tier manager for real. W. Chang Yun. Jiho was quite shocked, but Eri was petrified in her seat after hearing that. That very night, Jiho booted up Chang Yun's laptop to see if this little thing could really handle games. Seeing the smooth experience and the glorious graphics, he confirmed that it surely could. Chang Yun flexing that he can just lend a top-spec gaming laptop. Looking at his old and beat-up PC, his old buddy could finally retire now. That PC's soul was screaming that it was free at last. And so, 2 hours of non-competitive play passed extremely fast. Jiho had been trying to go as fast as he could in one of the anti-gravity maps, but no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't get as fast as he wanted, and the enemy team was too weak to pose a challenge. With his earphones in, his eyes were locked on the screen with 100% concentration. Victory screens after victory screens lit up the laptop's monitor, until finally he reached the max level grinding non-competitive matches. With this significant milestone, he could finally play the placement matches. Meanwhile, in Eri's room, she was still fixated on Jin Ali's amazing performance as a team captain. She still could not believe that Chang Yun casually mentioned that Jiho was better than the best pro gamer in the current times. Back in the club room, Chang Yun announced that the two most prominent figures in Sword Rush wanted to meet Jiho. Jin Ali, in particular, was noteworthy. She was the captain of South Korea's national Sword Rush team, after all. To add to that, she was also the current rank 1 in their server. Even Mr. Yoon was taken aback by this announcement, but further explanation could clear everything up for everyone. Chang Yun found it frustrating to keep this to himself. He explained that there used to be a game called One Sword, identical to Sword Rush in everything but the graphics. Jin Ali was a player who had not been dethroned as the undisputed rank 1 in the updated Sword Rush, but back in the One Sword days, she was only ever rank 2. Right after the tier system was added to that game, there was one uncontested rank 1 player, and that happened to be their teammate, Jiho. If they thought about it harder, it was no surprise, really. Since all of them had played the game seriously, everyone must have felt something different with Jiho's style. They must have felt that he has that dog in him. Yujin was the first to speak after a while. He got it now. All along he thought that Jiho was indeed some sort of genius. As Chang Yun went back to the topic of Guruf and Jin Ali, Jiho asked him how he found out. He confessed that he had heard the conversation between Jae-duk and Jiho. He wasn't intending to spill it to everyone, but he just couldn't keep it to himself. Still, Jiho should have said something to the team in the first place. Captain Eri had suspected something along the lines of this reveal, but she didn't expect the kid to be higher ranked than Jin Ali. Without much thought, she decided to stalk Jiho's in-game profile. She wanted to see just how good he could actually be. It did not take too long for her to sift through his game replays. Now that she was looking at it with analytical eyes, she could not help but curse in surprise. She saw the familiar tiny bright green claws going against a meta tank pick. Then the view shifted to the enemy DPS, and then to the allied DPS undergoing a duel. She realized that he was scanning everything around him, even in the middle of fights. His reflexes were just out of this world. He could casually reach up to 3 times the movement speed on the anti-gravity map without losing control. No wonder he got severe motion sickness. She also went through yesterday's scrim replays. She could not see how Jin Yang died in the hands of the DPS. But Jiho certainly did. She also failed to stay alert against the sneaky flank dash of that same DPS player. That's when Spiro finally got his basic skill spark out of cooldown. She was only realizing now how great of a player her teammate really was. She did not even realize that she was saved by such a fraction of a second decision, enough for her to know what to do next. Come to think of it, when she played with Jiho on the team, she could always fight 1 versus 1 without any obstructions. Looking at the replays, she now understood just how much work Jiho put in so she could excel in what she does best. She could not fathom just how hard that kid practiced to get this far and be this skillful. She felt ashamed that she thought she was the one putting in the most effort on the team. She didn't even know what to do now. At the corner of her eye, she spotted her wrist guard. In terms of attentiveness, it appears he surpasses her too. Jiho was the one who made her sub out after just 2 rounds due to overexertion. He was the only one who noticed her hand deteriorating throughout the rounds. She also recalled how the enemy captain had the whole team secured and confident under exceptional leadership. And that wrist guard, even that wrist guard was given to him by Jiho in the first place. She felt shame and regret for not realizing it sooner. She was supposed to be the leader, the captain of the team, and yet she was tunnel visioned by her own agenda to go pro. But there's hope in this shameful realization as she glances at her hands. She grabs the wrist guard and accepts that there will be tons of people much better than her. What she can work on even more, and what she lacks most, is leadership. That's a W character development coming from the captain herself. Back in Jiho's grind, he's been putting off placement matches until he spends plenty of time in scrims and analysis. This might not be his beloved one sword, but it's as close as he can get. Finally, the cue pops for his first placement match, and he wonders if he can really regain his rank 1 status again. As soon as he finds a match, all chat immediately goes crazy with toxicity. His off-meta Spiro pick is seen as trolling, and his team is already giving up. He's really getting the full extent of the solo queue hell. For his first placement match, 2 players are going DPS with 1 healer, and he's a support, since they don't have a tank. It's up to him to cover that role. As for the enemy team comp, it's the undying meta of 1 tank, 1 heal, and 2 DPS. He goes out swinging as he masterfully counters the enemy DPS while predicting the enemy tank's charge. And just like clockwork, the tank arrives while he predicts that the DPS will use this chance to escape. The enemy team does just that, but that's the last thing you want to do against an exceptional player. Now he's free to attack the defenseless retreating DPS. As he chips away at the enemy's HP bar, he calculates that the tank would retarget his allied DPS or healer instead. He reads the move like an open book, giving him a free attack on the defenseless tank. From downtown, he unleashes a critical hit to the head, immediately skidding across the ground for more momentum. This way, he can hit both enemies at the same time. He alternates his targets between the 2 unfortunate heroes, slowly draining their HP bars with speed and precision. It doesn't take too long for his teammates to wonder if he's smurfing, hacking, or just a god-tier player.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Jiho is just taking this as practice to get comfortable with this pace of gameplay. Ultimately, the goal is to use these moves for the real thing. Meanwhile, Yujin is back at it with his gaming cafe grind, but this time, he's alongside Jin Yang. With how frequently he's seen Yujin in this spot, it's not too far off to say that he practically lives in this cafe. But whenever he's in the game, he always looks like he's about to kill someone. Out of nowhere, Yujin asks him if he plays as well as Jiho, and he also. But before he finishes the question, it's gotten so late that they were kicked out of the cafe. Meanwhile, So-yeon is happily peeling an apple in her house. Her little sister has noticed something different with her, and asked her older sister if something good happened. There's one big reason why she's been upbeat lately. It's because she's getting closer with her friends as of late. In Changyeon's apartment, on the other hand, he's on a phone call confirming something. It looks like he's setting something up that would require some preparations. He finally concludes the phone call with his usual deadpan expression. He was having a conversation with the biggest sword rush streamer, Garaf. Changyeon is making moves with nothing but his AirPods and notes. Jiho noticed that even in just his regular placement matches, the majority of teams ran 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS. Seeing that the enemy team had picked Saigun again, he consulted his notes. It's the most popular pick in the current meta because of its damage against clumped-up targets. The key is taking care of this hero to end the match quickly. As soon as he entered the lobby, he politely asked his teammates if he could play Spiro as a tank replacement. The results were as toxic as you would expect. Competitive players are a different breed. Jiho was getting his taste of the world of solo queue hell game after game. He could only pick what he wanted while cursing his teammates. For him, there was nothing wrong with picking his main hero, Spiro at all. But he really wanted this to work, so he tried his best to convince his allies in the team chat. He finally convinced his team to let him play after they saw that he had over a 90% win rate with the hero. In the midst of his team's meta picks, the little Spiro promised to protect everyone. He assessed that since they had a healer that could tank for a little bit, he just needed to isolate the enemy's side gun for their comp to work. And that's exactly what he did. He did not waste a second to run wild and intercept the enemy's charge. His target was the surprise side gun of the enemy team. He recognized that after spotting him charging in, the enemy was going for the mad mix combo from the get-go. He responded with a perfectly timed counter as usual. He successfully deflected the blade of the DPS, giving him an opening. But the player behind was not just some pushover. They recovered and knew what to do next. Even though that counter hit was as precise as it could get, they recovered just fine. It really was a different league when it came to ranked and placement matches. The enemy was picking up the pace while he was being forced to dodge repeatedly. He had been getting some good parries and blocks in to swing the tempo to his side. He even managed to land multiple succeeding hits to take the lead at some point, but overall, it seemed like their duel had been equal thus far. For his next move, he predicted a flank attack, so he swirled all the way to the back. only to get bamboozled that there was no one there to defend against. His prediction was read by the Saigon completely, and now a sword slash was coming at him. The first clean hit of the match sent him flying while taking a decent chunk of his HP. And to make matters worse, that hit was enough to charge up Saigon's ult, to which any sane player would immediately use to finish the job against the annoying support. But offbeat combo timings were Jiho's bread and butter, and that's precisely what he did here. He intercepted the enemy's ult with his own counter, inflicting the highest damage output possible. And just for style points, he kicked back into the fray to finish the job. With how fast he was dishing out damage, all you could see was a green bolt draining your HP. Until finally, he capped the 1 versus 1 off with a critical punch to the chest region.
Now that's a lot of damage!
An off-meta support versus the most picked DPS in the game. Jiho made it look easy. He had eliminated the player known as Ager. Jiho was just happy that he faced off against the best Saigon player he had ever met so far. To let the enemy know that he enjoyed the fight, he wanted to find the hockey for the respect emote, but his hands slipped and Spiro Fortnite danced on top of the Saigon's corpse. We love a toxic king. He just ran off in embarrassment for accidentally being toxic against the enemy. But it looked like that Saigon took it personally. As he went off to the different side of the field, the win was easily achieved. His first placement match of 5 ended in a big dub. Right at the end screen, the Saigon from the match sent him a private message to play 1 versus 1. He just ignored it since J-Duck from Pogok High also sent him a message. He was informing Jiho that Changyun wanted to meet him out of nowhere. The next day, they were back in the halls of Dano High. Jinyang had been caught by the teacher and was punished to stand behind the classroom. He thought it was unfair that he was the only one that got caught every time. He and Jiho were talking, but he was the only one that got into trouble. They were having a whole conversation without a care for the teacher's lessons. But Jiho's inhuman reaction time saved him from getting caught in doing so. He could be an insane test cheater. Jinyang was already formulating a plan to slug his best friend's stomach or thigh today, and he decided on the stomach. Eugene, the local student, is always sleeping in class, and he never gets in trouble. It's unfair. Just like Jiho, Jinyang also wonders why they call Eugene local. Back to the other day when they both got kicked out of the gaming cafe, Jinyang watched as Eugene sulked the whole time on their way home. Jinyang had just been making friendly banter, but there was something weird about this guy. He asked Eugene if he went straight to play right after school, and the guy confirmed. Considering that this dude looked like an actual murderer, Jinyang just went with the flow. Now, at lunchtime in the cafeteria, Jinyang's mind is still occupied by Eugene's gaming addiction, while Jiho is just happy that they're having spaghetti for lunch. This kid eats like he's in a competitive eating contest. He really wants to rank first in everything. But Jinyang's curiosity is killing him. He wants to know why people call Eugene local, as in a local bully. This guy doesn't even know that people are calling him that. He doesn't even know what it means. Jinyang thought that this kid was a known bully around these parts. Eugene just got offended by that label. He insisted that he's not a child who bullies people. As for his menacing scar, he just fell over when he was a kid. And as for fighting, it seems like he doesn't even know how to fight, and there's no way to know since nobody's tried to fight him yet. Jinyang felt his worldview crumble, knowing that Eugene is just a guy with a scary face. Meanwhile, Jiho was choked on pasta and died. Rest in peace, my guy. Gone too soon. After classes, everyone assembled in the club room, and everyone also came as early as they could. According to Mr. Yoon, they can go ahead and practice today after doing the remedial classes yesterday. Stogi noticed something out of the ordinary. Jinyang is still reeling from his conversation with Eugene earlier. Chang Yevan asked everyone if they went home after finishing yesterday, but everyone is too addicted to the grind to go home right away, so they found themselves reunited in the gaming cafe. Ari and So Yeon were supposed to play as a duo today, but since everyone's here, they might as well do scrims instead. The gaming cafe's owner is happy to see that business is booming with these kids. With everyone here, Jiho sincerely apologized for not revealing that he was the former One Sword Rank 1. Captain Ari reassured him that there's nothing to worry about, though. It's partly their fault because they never bothered to ask in the first place. It looks like the whole team did not take his secret as a bad thing, so Yeon even chimed in that she probably would have done the same thing. Jiho still feels bad that he did not disclose it right away, but it's just because he felt weird flexing his prime when he's not as good as he used to be anymore. But now that Chang Yeon lent his laptop to him, he promised to practice more and get his rank. The captain kept on reassuring him that everything will be fine. For her and for everyone else, this case is not a big deal. Sheikun thanked him for being sincere and honest about it. For now, it's time to scrim with the whole team. Back in the club room, Chang-yeon asked Jiho how his placement matches went, but he hasn't finished them yet. Though his preparations are done, he's going to need the laptop for a few more days. Chang-yeon doesn't even mind lending him that gaming laptop for as long as he wants. He's here to discuss their next matchup, Bong-hoon High. School tournaments have become a shortcut to going pro, which is why the level of play in high school has significantly improved. Their next opponent appeared out of nowhere and attained the highest score in last year's friendly matches. The team's strategy is particularly concerning. They basically just cause mayhem, much like their own strat. Since the format of the game centers on close-range team battles, healers and supports have a lot of sway. These guys basically put their healer on the front lines to bait one-to-one duels, rendering their opposition's own strategy useless. If Dano High fights like they always have, the next match will be the definition of literal mayhem. As they were discussing the next match, someone came through the door. There was an unfamiliar voice apologizing for barging in. Everyone had their eyes on the surprise visitor. A man with dyed hair introduced himself as Guraf, the Sword Rush streamer. This guy really looks like a streamer. He asked the team if it would be alright if he started filming right away. Chang-yeon chimed in and told Guraf to explain why he was here today in the first place. Guraf insisted that he was just joking around, that he was here to see the incredible Spiro god. He scanned the room to see who that might be. Everyone looked at Jiho, and Guraf spotted him as well, shaking his hand. Guraf praised him for his performance against Yeonju High, stating that it was an honor to meet him. If he was already good with an off-meta hero, Guraf could only imagine how amazing he would be with another. Meanwhile, Jiho just sat there speechless and confused. Chang-yeon explained that Guraf received permission to be on school grounds in exchange for a donation. The streamer then called in his people to set up this small gift. With a single order to bring the donation in, multiple workers entered the club room with boxes upon boxes in hand. They were quick to work as the whole team watched in confusion. Since Guraf heard that the team practices at a gaming cafe, he gave them some brand new and complete gaming PC setups. Guraf is out here balling out with computers. He's doing all this for Jiho to make a grand debut on his channel. Jiho stepped outside to talk to the streamer, while the team was being blown away by the quality of their new setup. Even now, they're still in disbelief that they're getting all this. Captain Airy refused to believe that the guy would give them all of this for free with no strings attached. Guraf can afford to do this given that he's the official streamer representing the game, and it looks like they are buying Jiho out. They better prepare a multi-million-dollar contract. For one, his skills are way beyond the high school level anyway. There's nothing that the team can do to prevent him from going pro right away. As they were discussing, the door creaked open. Guraf came in with a defeated look as Jiho's talents matched his stubbornness. He decided to stay with the team until the end, and he wanted to hear everyone else's opinion. To add to that, he hasn't even finished his placements yet. So since those are strictly solo queue, it should be fine to feature the games on Guraf's channel. He can already see the views coming in when he puts a user with a 90% win rate on a trash hero in his videos. Everything's already set up, and Guraf has a phenomenal thumbnail editor. He promised not to reveal Jiho's face, but the title will be absolutely sensational. And just like that, Jiho will undoubtedly become a YouTube celeb, and the team will get to be friends with that star. It's a win-win. Everyone does not seem sold on the idea though, but that's when Guraf was notified that it was time to go to his next gig. He thanked everyone for letting him barge in and welcoming him with open arms, and we'll see them again next time. He even signed out with a please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell outro. And, well, you know the drill. Make sure you've done all 3 for this video. Just like that, the guy came and went, leaving everyone lost in thought. Jiho doesn't know if it was just because the guy was a streamer, but he couldn't get a word in their conversation earlier. He turned around to face everyone. For now, he wants to focus on the inter-school tournament, and he'd like to do it as a team. Jin Young is on the side of letting him debut his placement matches on the channel, since it couldn't hurt to do it anyway. He taunted Jiho, saying that that's all he's good for anyway. These two can be like cats and dogs at times. Yujin thinks that Jiho should do whatever he wants to do. So Yeon and Eri thanked him for thinking about them before deciding and advised him that he should take his time. For now, they should focus on scrims. Now that the matter has wrapped up, Chang-yeon wants to finish their briefing about Bong-hoon High. If the enemy angles for 1v1s, it'll go in their favor because of Eri and Jiho. However, The fact that other teams have been dominated by them with the same strategy every match is worrying. That suggests that their strategy is refined to the micro level, and even Chang-yeon was surprised by their replays. At first, he thought that Yu Jin was just a healer with anger issues. This airhead doesn't even know what that means, but looking over Bong Hoon-hai's replays, Chang-yeon realized that the healer could be positioned at the front lines if the situation calls for it. The enemy team lures the opposition with a healer bait, and then they immediately take the 1v1 duels for each player that takes the bait. Once this happens, the 1 versus 1 close-range battles begin to unravel. Whenever the rest of the enemy team comes forward to aid their teammate, Bong Hoon will cut each of them off. But the most surprising part of their strategy is how they make sure to never move beyond their healer's effective range. Their win condition is their skillful main DPS. The rest of the team will try to minimize the damage while stalling for their main DPS to sweep. Watching them play for a numbers advantage is reminiscent of a football strategy. That team is playing like they're in blue lock or something. Since the pool of players is limited at the high school level, the disparity between actual skill levels could be random. Even the best players in different teams are not on the same scale if they're not playing their main role. In their own team alone, So-yeon is the only one who can flex between multiple roles. Bong Hoon-hai's strategy is basically built to destroy the tank, DPS, and healer meta. It's all thanks to their director who used to be a promising coach, a real Sly type. That is why this time, it will also be using a proper strategy. Chang-yeon acknowledges that just having Jiho on the team is a strat in and of itself already. So he prepared some medication for him to take. This should help with his motion sickness. For now, he can play 2 matches back-to-back, but he still struggles as the late game of round 2 creeps in. He's fine when he plays at home, but overdoes it when it comes to official matches. With that in mind, he shouldn't be pushing himself too hard yet. They'll continue the second round rotation as usual. As for Eri, Chang-yeon gave her the floor to reveal something to the rest of the team. She immediately knew that he was talking about her wrist issues. The ever-so-clueless Jin-yeon hasn't even noticed anything odd with her wrist at all. So, the captain also thinks that she should disclose it to everyone. She admitted that after playing a bit too roughly, her wrist gets tingly now and then. As she was explaining her condition to the team, the doors of the club room opened once again. Owona's voice told Eri that it was a bit too early in her career to start having problems with her wrist. Just from the sound of that voice and a single glance at that person, Eri already knew who it was. She was speechless, stunned, and she could not believe her eyes. With dark blue hair and a cool leather jacket, she's watched this woman play on her monitor countless times. And it looks like she came at just the right time. She instructed Eri to change the way she held her mouse to alleviate her wrist issues. However, the captain was just awestruck at the sight of the woman who entered through the door. The woman had barged in and forgotten to introduce herself, so she apologized for her rudeness. She was none other than Jin Ali from Team S91, the captain of the national team. First giraffe, and now this. Today was truly full of surprises at their club room. Meanwhile, the usually stone-faced Eri was fangirling super hard at the sight of her #1 idol. Jin Ah told her that they could go over the details about her wrist some other time since she was here for Spiro right now. Jin Young was quick to grab Jiho by the collar and toss his best friend to Jin Ah. Best wingman. For real. From the moment they laid eyes on each other, it was almost as if they had met before. She was speechless, and so was he. With a sigh of relief and a blush on her face, she was glad that they had finally met. Given that she was older, Jiho referred to her as Numa XX Broken Heart Slay. Before he could even reveal her old in-game name, she managed to shut his mouth. And so, the two left Dano High to go somewhere else. Jiho was getting a first look at how luxurious the life of a pro gamer could be with her sweet ride. He asked her why she had come all the way for him instead of going to practice and such. She just had to come to check if he really was Spiro and to seduce him.
FBI, open up!
There was no one else who could recognize the great Spiro but her. After all, in Pogak High, the only other person who recognized Jiho just sneezed. He was confused and partially afraid at the thought of Jin Ah seducing him. She really did want to seduce him over to her team. That is. Things were going to change big time in the Pro League after all. And it was changing in Jiho's favor. He was curious about this change she was talking about. It did not take too long for them to arrive at their destination with how fast she drove. In the parking area, she informed him that Sword Rush would be establishing a solo league. For now, they should head up to talk more. They took the elevator to the 9th floor, the training facility of Team S91. As the elevator doors slid open, Players wearing team jackets stood up front. They did not expect to see Jin-ah return so soon. It looked like they knew that the kid with her was supposed to be the legendary Spiro. Since she was busy with Jiho right now, she just told her teammates that they could catch up later. That sudden touch was enough to get this boy to blush. And so they made their way to an isolated room to talk. They chose an office to continue their discussion from earlier. To explain further, the developer of Sword Rush, named Counters, had their eye on the school tournament. They figured that backing a tournament that debuts the next generation of pro gamers as the game explodes in popularity was a sure way to win over student gamers and increase the player base. Even data from gaming cafes indicated a steady growth in Sword Rush's popularity. The viewership for the amateur school tournaments rivaled that of the pro leagues. That's precisely why a week after the school tournament ends, Sword Rush's solo league will begin. They will be using the pro leagues to catapult the names of strong players from the school tournament. It's difficult to debut individual pro gamers bound to their respective teams, after all. Just like they did with the first gen of esports, they'll turn the solo league into a gateway for the new champions. And in her opinion, there is no one that embodies playing solo more than the undefeated Spiro right in front of her eyes. Jiho's interest was piqued, and he wanted to know what he needed to do to get in. She smiled as the first thing he needed to do was play a 1 versus 1 against her as former rivals. He smiled and agreed to that idea. Even from earlier, she had been dying to find out how he stacked up to his old skills. She assured him that he could relax around her. They go way back to one sword, after all. Hopping onto the game, they chose a small map filled with ice as snow fell. As they warmed up to the controls, she stated that it must have been someone else. There's this player that's been leaping up the ranks, and rumors were spreading that they could be one sword's rank 1. The player ignores chats, so everyone's been hyped up by the mystery. And so, they began. Her hero used a lightsaber, and Jiho picked Spiro as usual. She wanted to start the match off with a bang as she leaped and dashed with unbelievable speed. She traversed the snow without touching the ground and ultimately stopped right in front of Spiro. Now that they were facing each other after years, she couldn't help but be a little touched. Jiho assessed that her hero, Lift's skill set, perfectly suited Jin-ah's playstyle. Since her hero had a pretty fast base speed, it was best for him to stay outside of the attack radius. She immediately noticed that he went straight to a favorable position. He was resorting to mind games to predict her next move, a sign that he might still be rusty with mechanics. She was fully aware that it would be dangerous if she didn't catch a Spiro from behind, so she did her best to turn the tables by flanking with her lightsaber. But Jiho's not just your ordinary Spiro. He predicted the flank attack and responded correctly. He looked at her hero, and she did the same to his. They shared a moment before she unleashed another swing. This time, it landed and sent him flying for a second. He noticed that her attack patterns had changed since one sword. His Jin-ah Nuna had gotten better in every aspect. On the other hand, she noticed that with his perfectly timed counter mid-air, his reflexes and composure hadn't changed one bit. For her next move, she gathered some momentum and leaped into the air. She rained down some projectile slashes to see how many he could dodge. And Jiho did not disappoint. Every single projectile coming at him couldn't even touch his hero. Both of them were giving it their all with 100% focus. Countless strikes were blocked, dodged, and parried. They were stuck in a deadlock. That was until one of her attacks managed to get him out of balance for a moment. With how analytical she was, Jin-ah immediately got ready to capitalize on the opening. As her lightsaber went down fluidly, Jiho prepared his own faster move. A punch forced her supposed strike into a block, sending her skidding through the snow. But Spiro's assault didn't end there. He jumped right behind her for more. She used her superior jumping prowess to dodge the incoming flank attack. She couldn't help but admire how he used his movement skill, Spark, with such amazing timing. If that's the case, she had no choice but to use another one of her cards. Jiho had never experienced such a high-level match since he started Sword Rush. She unleashed her basic skill, Waterfall, while he responded perfectly with his trusty counter. The force from that collision sent both flying in opposite directions. The two knew at that moment that it all came down to the ultimate timing. She had heard that Jiho had only started playing this game very recently, and yet, he had already regained a lot of his skills from back in the day. If he was playing at this level, she thought that he could probably nail his signature super counter, but he admitted that he wasn't quite there yet. He wasn't in his prime form yet, but he wouldn't let Jin-ah win that easily. She responded with a knowing smile now that her rival was back and playing against her. Jiho remembered playing one sword all the time when he was just a kid. His glasses almost permanently reflected the action and the thrill of the game. He was totally engrossed in the world that only a few shared. She remembered feeling some discomfort in her wrist from grinding too hard, but ultimately choosing to keep going and sharing the screen to play against the rank 1. A genuine joy kept her going despite the sleepless nights and discomfort. Now the few years had passed, and they were both reliving that experience on a snowy map in a different game, with the same level of enthusiasm.
It's enough to make a grown man cry.
But the battle is just reaching its climax as another clash is imminent. Seeing Jin-ah getting ready to use her ult, Jiho also prepared to unleash his own, the super counter. Instead of the collision he was expecting, she went out of the way with a leap. While he wielded the super counter in his fists, her attack animation stopped midway through. Now, they were in the air while Jiho was still confused. His ult landed on her, but there was no attack to reflect, so he dealt 0 damage. But he could have sworn that she was using her ult at that moment, as she prepared her blade for the real climax of the match. She explained that in this game, ultimate skills can be cancelled if done at the right time. And with Jiho lacking his own ult, she could now freely unleash the tidal wave, a rapid rush skill that ignores defense with the possibility of an extra hit. The tiny hero was helpless against the raging waves of her lightsaber. It looked like that was it. This would be Jiho's first official loss in a 1 versus 1. This is his official welcome to the world of the pros. As Spiro fell to the ground, lifeless, Jin-ah could not help but smile at what had just transpired. She knew that this was the last time Jiho would fall for that trick she pulled, and the stinging colors of defeat appeared on his monitor. At first, he was speechless and confused about what had just happened. But that feeling of competitive spirit immediately raised his spirits. Playing the game had become so much more fun now. This is the feeling he had been chasing. It felt like he was playing one sword again. Jin-ah went up to him and praised his performance, given that he had only been playing Sword Rush for a month. He asked her if there was anything else he didn't know about, and she told him that he was pretty much set. Now that his skills had been confirmed, she offered her hand to officially invite him to her team so they could play like they used to. The possibility of playing matches at this level all the time was very enticing to Jiho. She added that the players they used to love playing against were already elites at Sword Rush. Once he joined their ranks, he could play with all of them again. His return as the GOAT was every pro's worst fear after all. He's the one and only Spiro Sword Rush. He was thoroughly convinced, but there were a few things he wanted to ask. But she reassured him that whatever it was that he wanted, the answer would be yes. The director and she were on the same page when it came to Jiho. All they needed was his yes, and everything would be set in motion. And so, he took her hand and told Jin-ah that he missed her. She gave him a big welcoming hug and echoed the same sentiment. After their match, they went back to the S91 meeting room. He disclosed Guraf's offer for him to appear on the streamer's channel to record his remaining placement matches. She wanted to know if the guy knew that he was the rank 1 in one sword too. Thankfully, Guraf was too talkative to give him a chance to speak. It certainly was not a bad idea to draw some attention before he debuted, so he accepted the offer on the condition that Jiho's face and identity wouldn't be revealed. She would make sure that the team manager contacted Guraf's side about these conditions so he could do the video shoot, but she also didn't want Jiho to play as Spiro. Jin-ah wanted to reserve Jiho's grand debut as Spiro at the Solo League. Their meeting ended, and she drove him to his next destination. He politely thanked her for the ride as he was about to hop off. She told him that from now on, she'd be bothering him a ton, so he should always keep his phone on him. From inside a cafe, a certain player of Pogak High watched as the exchange between Jiho and Jin-ah happened. At first, Jae-duk could not even believe what he was seeing. His mouth was wide open as his juice dribbled out. Jiho went inside the cafe to meet with the kid. As he arrived at the table, Jae-duk looked like he had just seen a ghost. He just saw the S91 pro gamer Jin-ah Lee in a sports car coolly driving Jiho. Could it be some kind of forbidden love, or was he just losing his grip on reality? First and foremost, he needed to know what's the deal with what he just witnessed. Jiho casually revealed that he signed with Jin-ah Nuna's team.
Emotional, damn it!
That is not something you just casually drop to pro hopefuls. Jiho just wanted to talk about Changyun's agenda for contacting Jae-duk, but the kid's worldview had already been shattered. He thought that it started with sharing a meal with a top player, and then it was going to go from Numa to Babe. But Jiho didn't have enough time for this, as he must go scrim soon. They were playing against the infamous Bonghoon High after all. It turns out that Jae-duk's friend, Seong-min Ji, plays for that team. But Changyun already knew about that and contacted Jae-duk about it. He told the master strategist stuff that wouldn't be a problem to reveal, but the guy already knew plenty. Jiho just asked if that friend of J-Duck was good, and he confirmed that he even thought that guy some of the things he learned from Jiho back in One Sword. And now, the Pro League is already eyeing him. As for his playstyle, he can be described as a healer who tanks. It got lost in thought for a second, and then it clicked for both of them at the same time. There's one player that has that playstyle, and they go by the name Pink_Undies. Back in the S91 building, the director's room to be specific, Jin Ah came to see the director. They saw each other every day to the point of getting sick of each other. The director paused his work to ask how Spiro was. She reported that Jiho's personality hadn't changed, but his skills needed some polishing. But what the director wanted to know was whether the kid retained his godlike reflexes. She confirmed that he still had those, but there was something odd about his playstyle. It didn't feel like he was playing Sword Rush. It's like he's still playing One Sword. He's probably stuck with his old ways because he hasn't had a real challenge yet. But she was sure that there was nothing to worry about. The director didn't need to stress. The team has the one and only Jin Ah Lee after all. I'm picking up sus vibes from her. What do you guys think?